Hi guys, hi, welcome in. It is Thursday night and time for another wonderful educational live. We are going to be discussing highly pathogenic avian influenza tonight, which is going to be a concern. It's not going to be a very technical talk, but we are definitely going to go over some of the issues with that and help clarify some stuff. I'm going to give this video a few minutes to generate onto the internet. So if anybody's stopping in, please feel free to leave a comment or question down below while we're doing this, because you like interaction. That was my opening. Now I'll get to the more regular opening. Hey, Kelly, what's up? We're talking about HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza. We're going to do our regular intros for people who haven't been here before, who might be watching late. Dun, 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 dun. My name is Christopher.
I'm Angela.
And the name of our channel and our little homestead is
The Dinosaur Omelet.
Dinosaur Omelet. Hi guys, welcome. So new people, why don't you tell them about what we do here, since I always do.
No, actually, I usually do.
Oh, you usually do.
But,
She usually does.
We have a small hatchery, so we focus on jumbo, wild, or farrow Coturnix quail for self-sufficiency purposes. We encourage people to raise them for meat and eggs, or just eggs, whichever you prefer, but they're really great producers of both meat and eggs, and easy to keep. And then also we encourage people, we share information to motivate people to learn skills and better themselves and spend time with their family outdoors, bettering the quality of their life with self-sufficiency and homesteading type things.
Yeah, self-improvement is a wonderful thing to engage in. Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Kelly. We got one supporter. Yeah, so self-improvement, and I'm not into that whole self-improvement culture thing that I know goes around where they're not really doing it just for themselves. It's more of a social thing. But self-development in private, when we do this for ourselves and we're learning new skills and we're building, building skill sets and having experiences and building relationships with the people in our lives because we're doing things together, it's a very fulfilling experience and it's better for the quality of our lives. So yeah, man, I do encourage you guys. Nobody's going to force anybody to do anything, but the information is out there, and there are some positive people out there who are happy to assist you with information and learning. I like teaching. I like giving information out, and I hope that it's the whole seed planting thing. Maybe one person out of 1,000 decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to go learn how to plant a tomato. Well, that's great. That's great. All right, what did Kelly say? I'm excited for this one because my Muscovies and chicken free range, but the quails are pretty safe and locked down. That's correct. And we're going to yap about that in just a second. Real quick, down in the description of this video, I put together a cool biosecurity flyer. It's at the very top of the description. You can just click on the link and it'll go to that. And then there's a whole bunch of other really good educational links down below. And all this stuff in there I make. It's not like copy and paste garbage. It's kind of written from scratch. And one of the ones I always claim you guys need to check out if you're interested in quail is this quail raising checklist. In the description, it'll answer all your questions about how to raise jumbo Coturnix quail and what it requires to have your own egg and meat program, which is extremely issue now for people because eggs are unbelievably expensive. They're like quadruple the price. So people want to raise their own eggs. One of the other things we do is we make a chicken feed. I'm not trying to sell you guys a chicken feed, but I am trying to let you know that we do a lot of research and education here just for ourselves alone. So we have happy, healthy critters.
Yeah, it's a layer feed that we feed all of our silkies, our layer chickens, and our ducks. It's something that we value quality of health, and we focus on feeding them the best that we can. So yeah, that's what we offer other people.
Exactly. Okay. So I guess we can begin this.
Yeah, sure.
So what are we at? 5 minutes in. I usually wait about 5 minutes. So we're about there. 5 minutes in to actually start discussing this topic tonight. So highly pathogenic avian influenza, protecting your flock, and understanding risks. I always write outlines for myself so I keep in, I got scatterbrain.
Yeah.
So HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza. There are low pathogenic avian influenzas. This is of great concern. And I think with a lot of issues that get into the media, there's hype surrounding it, and there's misinformation, and there's misunderstanding.
And like fear.
And fear,
Yeah.
you know, nobody likes walking into a dark room, so there's fear with what this is. But I don't like the word fear. There should be an appropriate level of concern. Always have an appropriate level of concern. That doesn't mean you're freaking out. It's mean you're aware of your surroundings, like even with your chickens. Like,
Yeah, more understanding, it does bring, like, clarity, and it helps settle the mind.
so a real quick intro so you guys understand what's going on. If you're not familiar with the HPAI and why it's an issue and why it's a risk, there's several things that I want to talk about. Number one is the pathogenesis. It's highly pathogenic, and it spreads very rapidly, and it's very fatal to poultry. So this is causing, a lot of problems, a lot of concerns. If you're getting one bird sick, then it's likely that, and we have to assume that many other birds may be ill. So it's very pathogenic. Everybody catches it. It's highly fatal. Number two,
the fact that they broadcast so widely, the guy who passed away from contracting HPAI, I think scared a lot of people. Yeah, very much. Is this
regional? That's a great question. If you go onto, I think it's USDA website, there'll be I think I put the link in the description for their resource package. There's a map, and you can map out where there's infections, what's being infected or what's being detected.
Kelly says it's not regional.
So you can take a look in, USDA tracking to see where they're detecting cases. But I'm actually going to discuss that later too. So here's some eye-catching stuff if you want to be scared. Just kidding. But this is why this is of interest. So recently, you may have heard about this a couple days ago, maybe this week, there was a duck farm in Long Island. Sadly, the last duck farm in Long Island.
Oh.
I know. I didn't know Long Island had that. I thought it was just mobsters. I don't know. But so the last duck farm in Long Island, 100,000 of their duckies had to be exterminated or culled from their, it was called Crescent Duck Farm. And it was the last one due to an avian flu outbreak. The egg laying issue, the egg price issue over the last quarter, you guys may be aware, 20 million birds, approximately, egg laying birds, had to also be eliminated due to the spread of the HPAI. Now, why are they exterminating an entire house full of birds? I'll probably mention this again later, but it's highly pathogenic. If one's catching it, they're all catching it. And another issue I want to discuss is the economic impact of this. This is why they're doing it. If you guys are not familiar with industrial or large agricultural poultry houses, take a look them up on Google Earth or something, take a look at their setup. They're very far apart. And why is this? Because you don't want cross-contamination. You don't want a fomite bringing one to another, and you want separation so particles aren't transmitting, because they're hot houses and breeding grounds for this kind of a disease, and it'll wipe out the entire, operation. What else do we got here? At the end of okay, so some stats. Actually, in May of 2024, cattle were detected to have contracted HPAI. Now, all this information I'm giving you guys is just food for thought before I actually get into this. So, a herd of cows or cattle, dairy cow, I believe, were contracted with HPAI, which means what? It's jumping from, avian species to mammals. Not good. Humans are mammals. That's right. People are concerned about this. So what was happening? The cows are getting infected. Dad jokes, of course. I don't know. Did I make dad jokes? I usually do. I don't even know.
I guess so.
It comes off my
I'm
head.
used to your antics.
So the concern with human contacting it to transmit to a human. I'm sorry, my brain's kind of out of it. Obviously, we don't want it in humans because it's extremely pathogenic and it's extremely fatal. The cases of human contracting of this disease in Asia were very high. It's like 20, 30% mortality rate, 50% mortality rate. What? Am I falling off the screen.
No, you're closer to the camera, so it's offsetting. There you go.
Yeah, so it's very fatal in humans, and again, it's pathogenic. But I'm not going to talk about that right now because that'll be too confusing. But just to give you some numbers.
No, read the comment above my dad jokes one.
No, it's not.
So we're reading on a phone.
Yeah, we're reading in a phone as we're sticking the head there. So the total number of chickens in the United States is about 530 million or so, at least according to my Google stats, at any given time. And at the end of 2022, there approximately were 310 laying hens, okay? 310 laying hens in the country. So when we hear 20 million chickens, that is actually a significant amount, okay? We're approaching the 8-9%, whatever that is, number of birds. And it's not a lateral one-to-one price adjustment. Like if I kill 10% of my population of egg layers, egg prices are going up 10%. No, it's much higher. So what did Evan say? Let's say I have chickens in my yard. Will wild birds be able to transfer the virus to my chickens? That's a great question. And in fact, so the issue with the yard chickens, and can backyard chickens contract this? Yes, of course, absolutely. If, of course, the virus is present, which is transmitted by mainly waterfowl at this time, like wild migratory birds. Okay, that's the primary vector, are the wild waterfowl. Snow geese, geese, ducks, flying and carrying their disease and leaving it where it will. Okay. Is that what he said? Okay, oh, he's just saying okay. Yeah, so can they contract it? Technically, yes, but again, the point of this is not to get people hysterical. Okay, it's low probability, high outcome if it does happen. So low probability, but detrimental outcome if it does. That's good to know. Yes, so we're going to talk about how to mitigate the potentiality of an infection, not just with the HPAI, but there's a lot of other much more likely diseases that are going to be present that you can safeguard against by implementing the same kind of safeguards you would for this. Anything else? Oh, last cool stat is about 663 or $64 billion of economic activity in the U.S. is from the poultry industry. It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
I could use $663 billion. Okay, cool stuff. Those were just stats. I'm going to get into this now. Mainly cows in my yard and some hawks and all types of small birds. Yeah, so Angela, what are these small bird issues, like the regular diseases, the likely illnesses that the chicken might contract from just regular birds, not the waterfowl, not the HPAI birds?
There aren't, I mean, mites and lice, or mostly lice, they come from, like parasite type things come from wild birds that your chickens can get. But there's not a lot of, diseases that they get from wild birds, but they do have, if they're carrying something, then there is a risk to the chickens. If the birds are going to the bathroom over the chicken's area, if they're sharing feeding areas, watering areas, that sort of thing. But I don't know the specific names of
That's fine.
illnesses other than
the illness in the soil, the coccidiosis, is probably one of the main issues.
Oh, I don't know that would come from wild birds.
No, I'm saying it's present in the soil.
Yeah.
Anyway, coccidiosis is present in the soil, and one of the main ways to keep any of your animals safe is keeping a clean facility. Not sterile, but clean. All right, so let's actually get into this. I don't want to ramble and give you too much information. So HPAI, a severe form of influenza caused by certain types of the influenza A virus. You hear H1N5 or H5N1 and all these. So H is a protein, it's hemagglutinin, and N is neuraminidase. And these two proteins are what bind to the receptors. I'm not going to get too technical with this, but you hear these different number designations. There's 18 subtypes of the hemagglutinin, or the H for subtype, and there's 11 subtypes of the N, the neuraminidase subtype. So 18, and 11. But just to let you know, because I know we hear that and you don't know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, what does that mean? What is that? You hear it and you're not familiar with it. So that's what that is. It's the shortened version of the name of these two proteins. Okay, so common types H5 and H7. H5 and H7 strains mutate into the highly pathogenic forms. And, we got a... Evan brings up a good point, but sparrows and smaller birds can be around wild waterfowl, so could spread to backyards. Yeah.
That's true.
At least that's what I've been told. Is this true? Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Yeah, so if the chickens are able to contract from the waterfowl, then wild birds are certainly also able to get sickness from waterfowl. So yes, that does make sense, Kelly.
and the time to be looking out for this, at least USDA and the state veterinary services, is this time of year, fall and spring, the migratory seasons, because you're having the birds' patterns are changing, and if they're carrying an organism, it comes with them, and it could be a potential issue like it was at the duck farm, not too very far from here. Okay, so what are the characteristics of this? So this is a high mortality issue. If the chickens are getting it, your birds are getting it, it's 90 to 100% fatal, and it's highly pathogenic. It's very contagious. Two very bad things. So it's a rapid spread within the flocks, and of course, as we talked about, it will be, if it's prevalent, a severe economic burden on the United States, because that's a huge industry, the poultry industry, eggs, meat, and other products, etc. Okay, would you like to read this? This is fun. This is the easy part. Historical context, the historical background of this disease.
It was when it was found out. It was identified in the early 20th century with the first major outbreak in 1959 in Scotland.
Land of the Scots.
Yeah, and there were other significant outbreaks in Southeast Asia during the 2000s, which is when the global concern was established.
You guys may remember that.
Right.
You remember it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so you probably do remember it. Zoonotic diseases love to fester in Southeast Asia and West Africa. Zoonotic disease, like animal diseases. So that's where they all seem to like to come from. Those nice, moist areas where it's humid and you can grow diseases and there's lots of organisms. Scrambled for me.
Cooking it. Recent history, 2014 and 15, the largest HPAI, is that how you would say it, outbreak?
Yeah, highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI for short.
Yeah. In the U.S., outbreak in the U.S., impacted over 50 million
50
birds.
million, yeah, in 2014 to 15 or so, maybe a little into 16 as well. And you guys may have heard too, so this is transmitting into some animal species. Again, don't freak out unless you're a seal, because there have been infections in seals, minks, foxes, cats, dogs, bears, I believe. Yes, bears. So it's transmitting into these creatures out into the wild. So obviously, again, no panicking here. That's the job of our elected officials and our representative bodies to go do this informational research. CDC, World Health Organization, is concerned about a mutation, right? This is the hype you hear in the news and on TV. Low likelihood, high impact outcome. Okay? It's like an asteroid impact. Very low likelihood, high
The
high
cases
impact
with
outcome.
other animals, though, I didn't look at the numbers. Did you look into the numbers at all as far as being low?
Yes, the numbers was a lot. I don't know. I don't have an exact number.
You didn't look. Okay.
But there was a mass seal die-off off of the coast of, I forget, I didn't even take that note. There was mass seal die-off from the avian influenza. So what the hell was I talking about in the humans? Right. So we're watching for monitoring. CDC, World Health Organization, is monitoring, because if we're having a transmission in the human population, ooh, that's bad. That's total, again, economic collapse, because it'll be a horrible issue. I mean, we all lived through the COVID, and that was a relatively low mortality rate compared to something like this, which would be much, much higher, 10, 20%, who knows. Oh, wow, a ton of stuff getting HPAI. Yes, there are quite a different variety of creatures getting it. I guess it's more prevalent in the news now just because when you're getting poked, you kind of want to see what's poking you. And what we're getting poked by now are high egg prices. So, I mean, that's a big issue. I hear everybody say high egg prices, high egg prices.
Has anybody noticed? I guess we raise our own chicken for meat. I don't know if the chicken meat prices, if that's been going up or not. We haven't been paying attention.
I don't know. I've been looking at the chicken meat prices, but they're two different poultries, the egg layers, which were called 20 million of them, and the meat birds. So the meat and the eggs, they can contain these viral particles. However, USDA did some really brilliant research in if handling these products was dangerous to humans. Yes and no. You don't want to touch any infected animals. But when they cooked everything at a regular cooking temperature, it was totally dead and inactive.
Yeah.
But still, they're not going to allow infected food into the marketplace. But if you were concerned, if you're cooking a HPAI egg or HPAI cow, don't do that.
So
but it would likely kill the organism.
When you were looking at the statistics, it was mostly you were looking at egg-laying chickens rather than meat chickens, because I suppose they're just as easily susceptible.
Oh, yes.
But yes. The numbers mostly are the egg-laying.
The poultry house that was infected was an egg-laying poultry house, and they culled the entire area. And again, the reason they're doing this, and I'm going to talk about your little farms too, if it would happen there. The reason they're doing this is because if one is infected, they're all infected. Or you're making the assumption there. Because how do you know? And if one has it, it's extremely contagious. They're going to catch it anyway. So it's kind of like the chicken nuclear option. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to, because I'm going to go back to that. Current global trends. So we talked about the vectors, which is primarily the migratory wild birds or the waterfowl, the geese and the ducks. And there have been recent outbreaks in Asia and Europe, and they're, of course, doing the same protocol, eliminating the birds from the population. And we discussed the seasonality of this. It does peak in spring and fall because of the birds' migration. Transmission pathways. So, what are the transmission pathways? Well, what was happening in Asia? There was direct contact with infected animals, right? And the exposure time made the difference as to why they had contracted it. The humans were contracting it because we're spending quite a time handling these infected animals. Now the animals have they're smaller bodied, they're higher metabolism, and everything processes, so they infect rather rapidly. So direct contact with infected wild birds, the waterfowl, the shorebirds, they're common. Contaminated water feed or equipment, and that of course is going to be considered like a fomite, I suspect, a surface or another object that's carrying a disease that's not another living animal that was deposited there from another living animal. And this is where later on we'll talk about biosecurity is quite important.
Yeah.
And now the big question, what are the symptoms of birds? What are the symptoms?
Of the infected birds.
Yes, what's the big number one symptom that you might notice?
Well, sudden unexplained death.
Yes.
That would be one.
So do you think these people knew the birds were sick, or do they pass it before symptoms? Did they pass before symptoms show?
So if the bird suddenly died, then obviously they may not have known. The people may not have known.
You're talking about the Asian guys who are dying of the bird. They're handling a lot of these infected animals, and they're not using the sanitary protocols that like an American poultry house. Not that they're probably 100% sanitary, but barehanded. They have open cuts. There's all kinds of issues, particulate in the air, water, vapor droplets that are getting to lungs. But mainly what USDA or CDC was saying was it was the exposure time, that there was a high level of exposure to the birds where they're working with them.
So lethargy, low energy, tired, reduced egg production, respiratory distress, swollen wattles, or the cones swollen, discharge from the nose or the eyes or the eyes.
So this, keep in mind, guys, because the point of this is not to get you to be alarmed or freak out when you see a sick chickens, because sick chickens are very common.
Yeah, so these symptoms, there are lots of other, there are other illnesses that could have these same symptoms. So it's important not to like panic or freak out. We're gonna, I think we'll talk more a little later, but yeah, you just want to quarantine, and the officials encourage testing and such just to make sure everybody's okay. But if if they are infected with this, your birds, then most likely all of them will be quickly infected.
Well, let me lead into that one.
Yeah,
so
okay.
It's soft. So if you're seeing these sudden unexplained deaths, like everybody's croaking off, that's an issue. And it may not be the HPAI, but it's definitely something you want to have investigated. So you want to call your state veterinarian or USDA and have them come take a look at what's going on.
Yeah, and there'll likely be multiple deaths, pretty rapidly, rather than one and then nothing, that sort of thing.
So their general protocol at that time will be to quarantine and depopulate of infected or exposed flocks, and then cleaning and disinfection. So what are they doing? Are they looking at a bunch of dead birds and then killing everybody else? No, they do testing, and they do verify for sure whether or not they were carrying this pathogen, which their protocol would be, yes, a culling of the rest of the critters, because the assumption is they probably do have it anyway. And they need to disinfect thoroughly the whole area, because it's a very, very serious illness.
It really is the whole area, including items and like feeders and stuff to be cleaned.
Yeah, and as we were talking about with the whole human to human possibility of this organism mutating, well, it works like this. It's kind of like dice, kind of, sort of. The more opportunity it has to mutate, to be challenged for a mutation, the higher the probability is it'll be doing that. So if it's always getting exposure, it's going to adapt, basically. So we don't want to have the opportunities for this thing to adapt by being exposed to mammals and humans or our birds.
But if there are any cases where it's suspected there may be an infection or illness, then things that you can do to find out what, who would test and such would be to report cases to state veterinarian or the USDA. There's a hotline, apparently.
Yeah, if you go on Google, I should have put that in there. It might be again in my notes. If you go on the Google and you look up, every state has a state veterinarian, and you have the USDA you can contact for, even if you have a general question about this.
Yeah.
And they should have a competent website as well. All right, so we talked about USDA response protocol. I'll get into that a little more later. And I would like to talk about probably the most important thing that Evan was discussing earlier, I think. It was him, about
with them being
infections. And the little PDF that's in the first thing in this description is what this is all about, is the biosecurities. Yeah, biosecurity. Biosecurity matters. Yeah. So what is
and biosecurity, just, quick note, beyond the avian influenza that people were thinking about, just general having biosecurity in general helps keep your birds healthy. Because just coccidiosis, for example, is something that can be a common occurrence in areas that have a lot of birds or a lot of animals in a stationary area. And if you have more than one pen, the other pen may not have that, and if you're trekking back and forth, you're gonna transfer. So just basic biosecurity in general is a good thing to maintain.
Absolutely. It's you guys really should be practicing some measure of, biosecurity, even on your little small farms.
Because it sounds kind of like scary, the terminology, but it's
we
just,
watch too many
just
movies.
Basic. I know, like the
scary
the
movies.
Stand and all that stuff. But,
but
yeah.
All right. What's biosecurity? Restricting access to your birds. That means like a lot of visitors. People call us. Can we come visit? We're like,
a lot of people have
no.
chickens themselves, or just animals, and they're gonna be tracking the shoes that they wear all over the place, everywhere, and they might be visiting their friend's house and go in and check out their chickens and then come and visit your chickens. So
I think 90% of the biomass on Earth of living organisms are microscopic little biologics. So the vast majority of living beings on Earth are microscopic. I mean, most of the cells in us are not human, they're organisms. Anyhow, so yeah, so it's very easy to transfer pathogens from one place to a next. And outside of the whole HPAI discussion, speaking about, hey, Andy Rabbit, what's up, buddy? Sorry, live people watching this later. People drop in the comments, and I like to say hi. Outside of the context of HPAI, these diseases, they can transfer very easily from one place to the next. Say the neighbors coming over and their animals are sick, but they don't know it. And the microenvironments the chickens adapt to. Those chickens over there may be perfectly fine carrying the pathogenic load that they have and that they deposit in the soil. But my little baby chickens over here, like they're treated totally different. Their environment's different. They're not.
Or just, yeah, go ahead.
They're not hardy. They're not hardy to that. And when those two get cross-contaminated, my chickens may not be so happy. Could make them. I got to make a live. It's a rare thing. Well, I appreciate you coming in, and he's like, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in.
I like, I'm the science brain dude, and I like doing scientific stuff, and I like disease and epidemiology.
Yeah.
I think we all became amateur epidemiologists and virologists about 5 years ago on the Facebook, telling everybody how virology works.
Yeah,
so we
this
should have a
talk should be
background.
very familiar.
Yes. So biosecurity is restricting access to your birds, avoiding contact between flock and wild birds, which for you quail people, good news. Your creatures are in a cage. They're probably going to fare very well from not just the HPAI, but really any other transmitted organism because they're pretty isolated. It's not impossible for them to contract something, but because they're in a hutch and they're not exposed to the ground, they have much less opportunity.
And I do want to mention, we keep, pointing out that there's no need to be fearful or overly, super concerned.
Yeah.
And just to understand what this is and how, what the symptoms are and such and what you can do. But I do want to mention, I remember back a year ago or so when there was a lot of talk about this before, there are people who were going really kind of, to a degree of trying to protect their birds as much as possible and cooping them in or keeping them in sheds.
Yeah, they got
buildings,
freaked out.
and they weren't allowing them out of the sheltered area, or if they did, it wasn't very long. And I just want to remind everyone that, like us, the birds do need, sunlight, vitamin D, that directly affects their health. They need fresh air to keep their immune system going.
Also, keeping those creatures in a hutch all the time is going to instigate stress, which will decrease their immune system anyway.
Yeah, and I'm talking about a really closed-in area. And I'm not referring to a coop that has a run that's covered and there's wire with lots of fresh air, and then the sun hits the run at a certain angle and they can get in the sun. I'm talking about cooping them up completely and being scared of outside.
Not good.
You want to keep their immune system good.
All right. So we're restricting access. We're avoiding contact between flocks and other birds. We're cleaning and disinfecting equipment. All right. But generally, I would, clean out your coops. Don't let it accumulate with manure because then that's going to create a whole nother bunch of problems. If it's a limited run and that gets soiled quickly, clean that up, shovel it out. Maybe even do a deep litter in there.
I'm a big fan of using agricultural lime, or also known as barn lime, sprinkling that down on the ground and applying new bedding or mixing it in the bedding on the ground because it helps with drying out the soil or the bedding area, and it does balance out the pH levels. So that organisms like coccidiosis and other nasty organisms that live in the earth, it's not hospitable to them, so they won't thrive or really be there at all.
Well, they carry The birds usually have some exposure to coccidiosis. It's once it gets to a pathogenic load, like
Yeah, and when so if you do add lime, agricultural lime to the ground, there may be coccidiosis, but like you just pointed out, the presence of the parasite will be less, giving the bird's immune system and bodies able to adjust and become more robust and not succumb to the parasite or have the negative impact because they can handle it.
yeah, one of my favorite science sayings, which is kind of like a layperson saying, which I love, is the dose determines the poison. Now,
Yeah.
I forget who said that. I don't even know why I say it all the time. So dose determines the poison, or in this case, the dose determines the pathogenic load with the coccidiosis. So anyway, so monitor and testing with the HPAI. So checking the healthier animals, you're watching them. You can even work with the NPIP, the National Poultry Improvement Plan. They usually have monitoring for this. Poultry organizations, maybe you have a local organization you belong to. If you're concerned about this, definitely keep in contact. People love, if this is an interest of theirs, they'll be very happy to give you that information. And the question, so some diseases we can vaccinate against in the avian population. There is, however, not a vaccination for the HPAI here in the United States. I do believe they're using something in Europe and Asia, but not here in the United States at this time.
Yeah, the note here says due to trade restrictions and
Trade
logistical
restrictions.
challenges.
That's
It's
the
not.
usual culprit.
We don't have it here.
All right. So handling suspected infection. Well, what do you think? We're going to isolate the creatures probably if you're seeing that sickness come in. And you're going to do that with any sick bird. You're removing them from the population. You're going to isolate them away from everything.
Which is good for both of them. It's good that to help the rest of the flock not get ill and also help the ill bird have a better chance of becoming better because it's not in a stress area anymore. It's going to be in a calm, cool, or more low lighted area where it can rest.
Now, this is important, and this is something about self-regulating. So we suspect, this is just hypothetical, I suspect that I might have this avian influenza outbreak at my chicken farm. I just woke up this morning and 4 of my birds were no longer alive. So what am I to do? Well, I've contacted the vets or the USDA. We're going to have testing done. And they're going to tell you this on the phone. Don't travel with, dirty clothing. Don't leave. You want to be disinfected. You don't want to be bringing anybody in there because now you're really a hot zone is what
Don't
that's
take
called.
anything. Don't remove anything from the premises.
Yeah, I guess they don't want to tell the American people this is a hot zone because that sounds really spooky, but that's essentially what it is. You're a hot zone and the organisms, you're assuming it's there and you're assuming it's thriving and you're assuming that everything is now a fomite, which is, like I said earlier, it's an inanimate object that's carrying this organism and it can be transferred, boots, clothes, pencils, whatever.
So they're going to want to test to confirm or, to show that whether it's there or not.
Yeah, and you want to know. But again, we're not freaking out. That was just a hypothetical situation. But yeah, so as far as biosecurity is concerned and concern for your community and other human beings, because we like other human beings, I'm going to stay tight, let USDA come in, run its testing, and really walk me through the appropriate disinfecting protocol so I don't bring it anywhere else. So I don't have to be freaking out about it. And they're going to tell me I'm perfectly fine because it doesn't transmit to humans.
And again, it's not something that like if 1 or 2 birds end up having it, then the rest of your flock that was also in the same space will be just fine. It's very likely it's transmitted to
If it's
the rest.
HPAI, yeah, for sure. It's going to be in there. So, anything else important there? Understanding risks. Risks to humans. I guess everybody's curious about the risk to humans. So we talked about this before. It's rare but possible. It's rare to occur. It's, again, low probability, high outcome. Like the asteroid impact. Very low probability, but high outcome if it happens. So, but this is possible, and because the outcome, let's just say this, the variables are in place that on a long enough timeline and not long enough exposure that would happen unless appropriate protocol and behavior are attended to.
Yeah, so the case in Asia where
Or we can assume that's what's going to be the case.
where there's a past outbreak, with the human fatalities, it was a prolonged exposure.
Yeah, they're whacking ducks up and stuff
Yeah, they
and
were
butchering everybody.
and breathing in for a long period of time.
Okay, so we're hoping we don't have a mutation. So potential for mutation. Virologists monitor for mutations that could allow for sustained human-human transmission, which would pose, again, another pandemic threat. And I think very much more or equally important is an economic catastrophe, which we've never seen, like probably 100 times worse than the COVID issue. There was a death in Louisiana, USA, though. Yeah, so there have been a couple. Was that a human?
I think so. I think I remember hearing something about that too.
The issue is the human to human transmission. So you don't want to be exposed to these animals with disease because it is possible for the human to catch it, as we already know, because it's happened. How long will it last within the ground environment before it's safe to get new birds? Yes, human. Andy Rabbit, I'm not qualified to answer that question, but I would assume, and I would look at the USDA Resource Center. I believe their protocol would really include totally disinfecting that. I mean, sterilizing.
And don't be scared to go into the USDA and check out their info, because it is good to have your questions answered as best possible, because that helps to dispel fear and concern. It's good to be understanding. It gives you more clarity and peace of mind, and gives you direction. So yeah, I'm sure they have some of that info on there.
But didn't mention he had a ton of underlying conditions.
Oh.
Yeah, use the resources available. So, you know me, I'm like up here in the woods, growing stuff, walking around barefoot. I don't trust the government either, right? But there's some things that we're using our discernment in. Like, okay, everything's politicized. Everybody's been made to go crazy about everything and not see things logically. And I'm an objectivist. I look at things objectively as possible and as logically as possible, and separate my whole emotional paranoid self over here while I look. And what the facts are is that there's an organism being transmitted by wild waterfowl that's highly contagious into our domestic bird population, that is also highly fatal in the domestic bird population, which we saw with these egg-laying birds. And that is a major economic contributor to the United States economy. And the residual effects of an outbreak, a large-scale outbreak, would be also detrimentally economically impactful because of the fear response of the consumer population. So we don't like that. So we do want to use our discernment, be objective, get information, and discern. Like, I'm not going to watch a news article that says, dun, 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 the end is coming. Yeah, okay, but like, what's legit happening, and what's the data? If you ever hear me on these videos, I'm saying, what does the data tell you? What do the numbers tell you? And are they qualified data? Like, is it good data? You know, because we watch, when we hear messaging, it's unfortunate, but a lot of the messaging we do hear has a bias toward it, or an agenda, or a intent of outcome. So we need to do our own due diligence and research the information we're getting and make sure it's qualified. Okay. Appropriate level of concern. Oh, no, we're not going to do this. I just want to go over the key takeaways. And I think the main key takeaway is human cases are rare at this time. CDC and World Health are monitoring. USDA is monitoring to make sure there's not a spread in domestic poultry population. And we certainly don't want to see human contagion. And the other important issue is biosecurity is the first and foremost way to ensure a healthy and safe flock, not just from this, but from the much more likely other contagions that are potential in a chicken or poultry setting, particularly in our small farms. On our small farms, if you're in a big industry, they have guys who are head of biosecurity. They have teams that are monitoring constantly because, it's a multi-million-dollar business over there. So they have to monitor it. Now, if you're a small homestead, it's your job. You're going to be your own independent overseer. So
yeah, monitor your animals on a daily basis. Just check behaviors, movement of the birds, alertness. That way, if anything comes up, you are familiar with their energy type and behaviors, and you can tell pretty quickly if something is off. And then, feed good foods, good quality foods to keep their immune systems boosted. And with the exposure to wild birds, if you're able to have your run area covered, then that's a good thing. If you have free ranging, then they're free ranging.
Yeah, so one of the transmission vectors is going to be droppings.
Yeah.
So if a bird's flying over and decides your chicken pen looks like a nice toilet, that's not good because you may be leaving a load of pathogens as well. So signs of the HPI, as we're concluding, signs that your birds may be having this. We talked about this, sudden death without symptoms because it acts very quickly. Okay, it's highly infectious and acts quickly. If you're seeing dead birds or even a bunch of dead birds, lethargy, lack of appetite. Now be careful with lethargy, lack of appetite, severe respiratory distress because these can imitate other diseases. There is a low pathogenic avian influenza as well. That's not as large a concern because it's much more common and it's not as detrimental. All right. Differentiation.
I had a dog that the vet was pretty sure had the bird flu about 8 to 10 plus years ago. She had eaten a dead bird.
Wow.
We put her down.
Oh no, I'm very sorry to hear that.
sad,
That's
yeah.
horrible. God. I wonder if he tested and had that sample tested to find out what strain it was. 10 years ago would have been around the time that HPAI was going around, 2014,
Oh, right.
15.
Yep.
So that's very curious, Andy. Sorry to hear that. That's awful. I would hate that. Your dog or cat goes out and then...
Yeah.
So main transmission is direct contact with infected birds. They're dropping saliva or secretions. So earlier we was talking about...
No test.
Earlier we were talking about biosecurity and keeping things clean. The saliva and the transmission of droplet particles will happen sometimes in the feeders, okay? While they're sleeping, other animals might be coming by and drinking and eating out of the communal feeder there. So that is something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, you might want to remove feeders, outdoor feeders, or put them away at night, or feed only what they'll eat during the day so that there's no food left over. But that's a good practice anyway, because that will discourage rodents, rats and mice from coming into the area, and they can cause their own issues. But yeah, that would also obviously discourage Tweety birds and such from visiting the feeders. The waters you could either dump and refresh the next day, or just think through your setup and see what you can do to discourage the birds from
Or if you're
visiting.
very careful, you could keep a rotating litany of feeders or waterers that you replace. If you're very concerned about biosecurity, that would be an optimal idea, is to switch them out every single day, disinfect them, and rotate. I never thought about this one, getting into a feeder. Yeah, so at night, like another issue we talk about with the whole communal feeding area, especially in spring and fall, is the predator issue, because then foxes, raccoons, they need to eat, or they're having babies and they need more calories, and they smell yummy chicken food. So they come over, and rodents and other animals are going to start eating where they may not have been.
Yeah,
Right.
and even the birds, the Tweety birds, because the birds, everyone who has poultry knows that they're gonna go to the bathroom wherever they are. So if the Tweety birds are picking at some of the chicken feeds, then they're going to also eliminate in that area too. So discourage that as much as possible if you can.
All right, so a couple other symptoms real quick. This discoloration of the cones and wattles, the little things on top of their head.
Yeah, and
Right.
swelling.
Yeah, decreased egg production, swelling of their wattles, and their swelling in their head, neurological signs, twitching and whatnot. Now, again, these symptoms are common to other illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So you see a sick chicken, I'm not, oh my God, he's got the HPAI. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if, especially with a sudden death, ill birds.
Because birds are the most common illnesses they get tend to be respiratory. So some of those respiratory illness may have these similar illnesses. So yeah, just stay calm, quarantine your bird, see if anybody else gets it. And there are different types of antibiotics or simple things that can be done, to evaluate or use to treat. And then also, like we had already mentioned earlier, coccidiosis, that one actually has similar symptoms, the lethargy, low energy, isolating, closing their eyes, and sudden death, especially in younger birds, because the load is too great for them. So, and if that goes untreated, and because it is contagious in their manure, then the other birds can get it as well because they're pecking at the ground, which is where it is. Then they could get it as well, and you might have more fatalities and be confused and scared. But it might just be coccidiosis, and there's simple treatments for that as well that you can put in the water.
Important, keeping secret. So I think my birds have HPAI. I don't want the USDA coming in and culling all my birds. You won't have to worry about that because if it has the HPAI, they're all going to, no, most likely,
Perish.
most of them are going to perish, and if not, they're going to have after effects from surviving such a horrible illness.
Yeah, and that's why I kept mentioning that if one
We'll have
has
them
it, then
tested.
they all probably
Yeah,
have
they
it.
probably all have it.
And because,
You're assuming they do.
yeah.
You have to. So the idea is like, oh, I'm not calling them because they're going to come in and kill my birds. Well, they're going to test. And yeah, man, if one has it, they're definitely going to probably call the entire bunch of them. But if you don't call and they're sick, this sickness is just going to spread, and you're going to bring it out to the neighborhood and when you go to the store, etc., wherever you're going, because it's on you. And
On your shoes.
And you want to be checked out and make sure your home is clean. Anywho, with this issue, there are programs in place with USDA to compensate for birds. If it's a concern, like that whole cost, because I know they're expensive, call the old insurance people. Everybody here pays insurance. See what they tell you. There is farm insurance, but then see what your insurance guys tell you.
And we're not sharing this information. We're trying to be thorough. We're not in any way trying to cause any fear or overreaction in any way. It's good to know as much info as you can, what your options are, what to do. And it's unlikely that you'll experience this in your own tiny little flock, but it is good to be aware of what's going on and how you can be affected.
Yeah, I think that about covers it. The main issue is the whole emotional component to this. People are afraid. There's a fear because we don't know. There's not a lot of quality information or thorough education being given out, I think, when we're watching a news report, because news is supposed to sell advertising, and they do that with a sensational story. 20 million birds killed. Okay, now I'm concerned. Do my birds get it? They don't tell you. So I hope some of the information we gave here clarified some of that. It is a concern. It could be a major issue if it enters into the general population of poultry, because then we're going to have all these, I think $20 a dozen eggs are expensive. Wait till they're
eating eggs.
Yeah, wait till the mafia is hijacking tractor trailers full of eggs and selling them like they did back in the 60s with smokes. They're going to be expensive. So right now they're pretty expensive. But we want to see the population of egg layers return, and we want to see that market normalize. If there's an infection of this, that's not probably going to happen. So it's even up to the individual, okay? The individual small operation to stay abreast of the wellness of their animals and report illness if they see it or if they believe it's the HPAI. Talk to your regular vet.
Or have
guidance.
A vet can do a blood sample. But yeah, like Kelly mentioned at the very beginning here, that her quail are nice and safe. They're in a hutch, so it is a nice thing with the quail. The jumbo quail are nice to have because they're safe from wild birds. The wild birds can't get to them typically in the setups that people tend to have to keep the quail secure and safe. Yeah. So they can live their little happy little lives in their pens and their shelters and such, and be completely fine from.
Not that it's impossible.
Yeah.
But they are much safer in there because they're isolated. So if you guys have any other questions, drop them in there. I hope this was informative, even though it's for entertainment purposes only, and I'm not a veterinarian.
Yes.
Nor am I giving out veterinary or medical, legal, or financial advice. I should have gave that disclaimer at the beginning, but it's in the description too. Yeah, but I hope that information was somewhat useful for you guys. Again, please check out the description. There's a ton of really good information. I made a little biosecurity reference sheet for this video that's on top. The feeder was a warning thought for me. Yeah, just keep it in mind. Like what do? We empty out our feeders or make sure the animal eats?
I feed all of our ducks and chickens fermented feed, and that's really good for them. You can ferment any feed, but it creates probiotics and super good for their gut health and boosts their immune system. So that gets them, helps them be more robust to begin with. But I feed them a serving size per day. Otherwise, they will overeat because they love it. So they get a serving size, and it's cleaned out before evening.
And that keeps there's not a ton of food for rodents to come and for the predators to come look at. I just have quail in cages. Oh well, that's great. Yeah, they're great. I mean, they're fine. We've never had an illness with the quail.
No,
they've been fine.
Yeah, the only thing we've ever heard from people. Is that they end up, sometimes people don't clean their sheltered area enough and allow, or maybe they just don't realize or pay attention enough, and the manure can build up.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then that creates a breeding ground potentially for organisms, and people might end up getting coccidiosis. So I've seen that with quail.
It goes back to biosecurity. Keep it clean.
Keep it clean.
Yeah, check out the little biosecurity reference thing at the top of the description. It's free. It's just something you click on that I made a few days ago. I'll be making some covers for the feeders soon now.
Yeah, good. And then another thing, like I had mentioned, that birds in general are more susceptible to respiratory type illnesses. With dust baths, just keep in mind that the material you're using isn't super dusty in the air when they're kicking all that material up. If it's like play sand is nice because it's kind of a coarse, or sand in general, it's like a heavy material that falls when they kick it up. But sometimes people like to mix different types of dust, like literal types of dust, into the sand or dirt. And the birds can breathe that in, and it can cause irritation to their respiratory system, then causing, issues respiratory.
And they have a very high respiration rate.
Yeah, so overall, like, you want to, with biosecurity and just like different things you're thinking about, their environment and such, to keep them healthy.
Excellent stuff. All right, cool. I guess that'll do it.
Yeah, thank you guys so
that was
much
shorter
for
than I
watching.
thought. I thought I'd be here for like an hour and a half because I had a lot of information.
Almost an hour.
It's complex. So this is biology, and there's some biochemistry, and it's very, very, very complex if you want to get into it.
Like diatomaceous earth. I actually do not recommend using diatomaceous earth because we just did a video.
Chicken myths.
Chicken myths. We talked about diatomaceous earth because if you look at it on a microscopic level, it has jagged, rough edges, so it's almost kind of like it can cut.
Well, thanks for stopping in, Andy.
Microscopic way, yeah, and so yeah, I do not encourage people to use diatomaceous earth like at all because it's bad for you too. If it's in the air, it can cause damage to you as well.
I knew because there's so many people. This is one of those issues where it's like that's the hill they're dying on.
Yeah.
I use diatomaceous earth, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
If you're using it for parasites, external parasites, mites and lice, there are other alternatives. I'm a big fan of Electra PSP. It's a concentrate you dilute in water and spray directly on the bird and also in the coop, and then you let it dry.
So the diatomaceous earth
effective.
Works like a drying agent or a desiccant. It gets onto the little bugs, the little tiny microscopic bugs, and the microscopic glassy looking particles get on top of the little tiny bugs, and it scratches them up, and it starts dries them out. It gets to that waxy coating, and that's how that kills them. It dries them out, dehydrates them. But like she was saying, it is a fine irritant, because if you do look at it under the microscope, you're going to notice that. And when they breathe it in, if they're respirating, again, watch, if you guys have time, Andy, anybody else, watch your birds. Just watch them breathe. They're not like humans. They're like this. They breathe, they have a higher higher respiration rate, and especially in summertime when they're trying to cool down and they're going to be using the dust even more, they're breathing more, and it can become an irritant. But, you know, you live and learn.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, if you guys are new to our channel, feel free to subscribe, like the video. We are growing our channel as we can.
Yeah, you know what? We had like a whole bunch of new subs this month, like 100 new people. So if you're one of the new people watching, thank you for joining us. You know, I work actually very hard on these videos to give you guys good info. Not bragging about it, but God, there's so much junk on the internet. And
yeah, your time is important. It's very precious, so try to give you quality information.
yeah, and I like to educate people, and I like to see people happy and saying, oh yeah, that weird shaved-headed guy on the internet told me I could grow a tomato, and now I'm growing a tomato. And I'll be like, all right, good job, all right. Somebody did something good. A great description, Chris of DE. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, look into it. It's interesting stuff. It's actually, so the diatomaceous earth, it's a microscopic fossil. It's a fossilized algae. It's really cool. But, you know, I should have been like a kindergarten teacher, like a first grade teacher. I could take all the kids out and talk. Because I'm fascinated by all this stuff. I'm still like a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Well, dang, I'm not sub anymore for some reason. Oh, my goodness. That's all right. I think that happens on the Facebook. Everybody unfriends me.
Well, I think sometimes the thing, it does it on its own. Oh, thanks.
Oh, thanks, Andy. Yeah, we've still been here. I try to do our lives every week. So video over. Now I'm just rambling because I'm going to talk about personal stuff. I like a challenge. And what's cool about these videos, we've been doing them for 3 years.
Or more.
Yeah. I do a different topic. I've been doing a different topic, and that's a challenge. Like occasionally I'll repeat like Quail 101 or chicken care. Like I'll do that like once every 6 weeks. I'll do like a re-intro to taking care of birds. But I really like trying to figure out, I want to do a new subject that I haven't done before that's interesting. So that's a fun challenge. And then a lot of the stuff I know, a lot of the stuff I'll have to learn, and I'll spend a week learning something, and then I have that information. And usually I keep it all, so I guess that's how that works. You ever see those old guys that know a ton of stuff? That's what they're doing. They're learning a little bit by bit, and then it stays. So, yeah. New people, feel free to hit the like and sub. People who already subbed, thank you very much. I hope this is useful. Okay? Yeah. And it is time for us to go to sleep. What's that? That's been happening. I've lost a few channels that I was a sub for some reason lately.
Yeah, I think for some reason I think the YouTube does kick you out sometimes. That's happened to me before, and I've had to hunt down whatever the channel was and resubscribe. Yeah, so I don't know what the deal is with
Bad
that.
YouTube. That's not good.
Yeah.
Well, glad to have you back around, Mr. Andy. If you have any questions, drop us a line, or if you're on the Facebook, go over there. We're always easy to reach on there if you want a message about something, about quail. And again, if you want, check out all the free PDF information stuff we've designed over the last few years. Okay.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening or day whenever you're watching this later. And for you guys that are on now, thanks for stopping in, asking questions, and making comments. It's always nice to have you guys here. Yeah.
Yep. Time to take out the trash. It's trash.
It's trash night.
It's trash night over here in our village. So we'll see you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.